a guy that I know will be a part of Blazers excitement next season, and he's already formulating some great things that he'll be writing about and talking about on Comcast Sports Northwest and on CSNNW.com during the offseason, is our friend, our Blazer insider. That would be Jason Quick. Jace, I know that earlier today, I always follow your tweets, and a tough day in many respects because some friends and people that I know you work with in the past at the Oregonian, a tough day whenever layoffs come into play, and some good people, unfortunately, felt that today.
Yeah, it was a bummer. Mike Taquito, who I shared the beat with for several years, was one of the layoffs, and that just really hurts. And unfortunately, it's a sign of our times where newspapers are really struggling now to stay afloat. So, my thoughts are with all those people today who lost their jobs. I mean, it's really tough time.
Well, let's talk about what's going on in the offseason for a lot of teams, but still, of course, we have a champion to be decided. And we were just talking, Michael and I, in our last segment about the somewhat non-competitive games for the most part in the playoffs up to this point in time. We mentioned that Adam Silver is not concerned. He said we should celebrate the excellence of the Warriors and the Cavaliers rather than look at maybe the teams that aren't giving them much competition to this point. Kevin Durant said, if you don't like what you see, and don't watch it, which is a pretty simple philosophy. But how do you view the postseason? How much basketball have you watched in this postseason, and has it been tough to sit through some of the games that haven't been competitive for maybe long periods of time?
Yeah, mostly if it's not competitive by halftime, then I usually stop watching. But like last night, that was a great NBA game between Boston and Cleveland, and that's the essence of what the NBA is all about, is just ultimate competition. And I think what we saw from Boston, you would hope that most teams play that way, and I think that's what we've been used to in Portland. The never say die attitude. So you like to see that, but as a whole, I think it's been hard to watch the NBA playoffs just because the games have been such big blowouts.
Jason, are you surprised that there have been back-to-back games that haven't been competitive? I mean, sometimes in a series, game one, you get a team that blows out another team, and then, the losing team makes adjustments, and the game is at least competitive in game two. I thought the Boston series was surprising in that there wasn't any life in Boston in game two, and then for them to come back and win game three.
A little bit, Michael. I think it happens. I think back to the Blazers-Clippers series 2 years ago when the Blazers lost games 1 and game 2 by, I think, both of them around 20 points. And then, of course, the Blazers made a series of it. So you're right, though. Usually teams make an adjustment or just, find some pride and have a better outing. But to me, I mean, that game 3 that Boston played was really impressive without Isaiah and everyone counting them out, and I'm sure it was hard for them to kind of summon that mental edge to go out and compete against a good team. But this is tough for the rest of the league because Golden State and Cleveland are so much better than everyone else, and I think that has been the story so far in this, in the last month and a half.
Then I guess that kind of begs a question that feels obvious to me. Then, if these playoffs continue according to the script, and Golden State and Cleveland meet in the finals, do you think one team can blow out the other? I
don't. No, I think this will be the third straight year that they played each other in the finals. I think both teams, they probably wouldn't admit it, but both teams since the start of the season have had one eye on the other and kind of, gauging what's going on, what their temperature is, what's working for them, thinking how they can stop them. And I think really, and this is what I watch for during the playoffs is, how can Portland improve themselves to compete with a Golden State or to compete with a Cleveland? And I think that a lot of people in the NBA are looking at the playoffs with that kind of lens of how can we project ourselves into that situation and get into this conversation. And it's interesting. I was just at the Combine a couple weeks ago in Chicago, and listening to all the draft prospects talking, and how much they talk about watching today's game and watching Draymond Green. I think Draymond Green, we talk a lot about Stephen Curry and LeBron James, but Draymond Green is resonating with today's youth, of the people who are coming up and about to be in the league. And what is resonating is how he has become such an impactful defender. And a lot of the players now are talking about how they need to play both ways, how they need to be able to guard not just their position, but up and down. The guy's bigger than them, the guy's smaller than them. And I think Draymond has changed that. And so I guess my overall point is, I think a lot of people are watching these games to kind of figure out how they can get into that conversation. And I think a lot of it has to do with defensively. How can you stop Golden State? How can you stop LeBron James in Cleveland?
Jason, you make a number of really good points, because the defensive end of the floor is where a lot of guys coming into the league should focus, because very few teams are going to draft or bring somebody on board that's going to be a double-digit scorer or change the direction of the franchise on the offensive end. But to the other side of that coin, looking at Golden State and Cleveland and the NBA at large, because offense is so marketable that people pay close attention to how people score. But Cleveland and Golden State are two of the league's better defensive teams, and Draymond is probably the only one on either team that people pay close attention to for how they defend.
Yeah, that is the number one challenge, I think, in today's NBA for coaches. I think most coaches would tell you that, is getting your team to buy in to playing defense. And, it helps to have great individual defenders, but it takes a team, and you hear that all the time. It's not going to be a one-on-one matchup to stop Kevin Durant. It's got to be a team, because you need help defense, you need rotations, all of that. It's a team effort. It truly is. But I think the thing that really jumped out at me when I was in Chicago at the Combine was, I've never heard so many kids coming out of college talking about their defense. Usually it's, hey, I can shoot the three, I can create my own shot, I can do all this offensive stuff. There were more than a handful of players boasting about their defense and talking about their defense and marketing that as kind of their way to get into the league, their thing that will get them drafted in the first round. And I think that is really unique. I can't remember in all my years of covering the league of hearing such strong talk from people coming into the league about defense.
Jason, that is so good to hear and refreshing to hear for basketball purists, or I guess basketball fans, because oftentimes the mindset now is because of the way kids play basketball and AAU and traveling teams and not being held accountable, that the defense is atrophying and the competitiveness is atrophying in favor of dynamic, entertaining offense. So if that needle is starting to move back towards defending, stopping your guy, being competitive, slapping the floor, getting in the stance, that's a good thing for the game of basketball.
Absolutely. And I think, you can relate to this, Michael, because you were a D1 coach, but it starts in college. I mean, you need to have principled coaches in college, and the Frank Martins at South Carolina, Coach K at Duke. These guys are guys who are laying down the line saying, if you want to play, you better play defense. And so I think it's really important at that level, as they groom people groom players for the NBA, that defense is made a priority.
Jason Quick, our CSNNW Blazer insider, with us here on Trailblazers Courtside. And Jason, you mentioned being at the draft combine and kind of taking a look at maybe some of the guys that will be hearing their names chosen when we get to the draft in just a few weeks. And you can see why teams like the Blazers say that maybe the best way to compete, the way things are presently structured in the NBA, is by drafting well and retaining your players. And I think the biggest problem that the NBA has, and I don't even know how you legislate it, as much as people spoke up about Kevin Durant signing with the Warriors to try to make them a super team and so forth, to me, the bigger problems that the league had were signings like Zaza Pachulia and David West signing with the Warriors for far less money than they could have got other places, as they kind of try to cherry pick a championship as they get a little older in their NBA careers. And I don't know how you can legislate against that. I've always thought that the buyout situation, once you get past the trade deadline, is a horrible thing, that guys like Darren Williams can be really malcontents playing for the team that they were on in Dallas, and pretty much deciding that he wants to stir things up enough so that the Mavericks will say goodbye to him. Now he tries to win a ring by being picked up very cheaply by Cleveland. So, I think teams, in the old days, again, I think people would go maybe for, the rules are structured for teams to hold on to their players by paying them the most money. But now you're seeing some guys are saying, especially with the ability to make money with endorsements and so forth, it seems like that isn't as important, and guys are maybe trying to join together and win a championship somewhere else, and with teams that are already pretty good. And I think that makes it even more difficult for teams that are trying to get to that level to be able to compete with things like that, again, I'm not sure how you legislate it.
Boy, Wheels, you got a little fired up there.
This subject comes up every time around the trade deadline. You can ask anybody who knows me that I talk about this every year, and it always happens, and it always bothers me.
Well, I think, if I'm not mistaken, I believe that the commissioner and the general managers have tabled your second point, the signing guys after the trading deadline, and I think that is up for debate about changing that rule, because I agree. Now, the other one, the David West and the Zaza Pachulias, that I'm not as against that, because that's made for the right reasons. You want guys who are making decisions. We're always complaining about guys who are overpaid or chasing the money, and those guys are doing it for winning. They're chasing something that is admirable, and they're not doing it for the money. They're sacrificing. So I don't really necessarily have a problem with that. But yeah, the Darren Williams type transactions where guys are getting waived and then signing with a contender, I think that will be changed in the future.
Lastly, Jason, we got about a minute left. I wanted to ask you about your thoughts as we look toward the draft. If you had to guess today, if you had to make a prediction, do you think the Blazers will hold on to the 3 first-round picks that they have, or from whatever you might be hearing or sensing, do you think that it's going to be an active day, maybe looking to package some picks that by the time all is said and done, maybe they don't use all 3 of those first-round selections?
Yeah, it's really hard to say, Wheels, just because it takes 2 to tango, but I think Neil Olshey is going to be very active, and I think we've seen how creative he can be, particularly on draft night. So it would not surprise me one bit if he makes a deal that day. But I do think they will be bringing in at least one rookie next year. I think this is too good a class to give all 3 of those picks away. So I think he will go young with at least one of those picks, but it wouldn't surprise me if he packages 1 or 2 of the others and tries to get some experience in here. But that's one thing about Neil, is he is incredibly crafty, incredibly creative, and he's shown to have a very good drafting record. So it's kind of a catch-22. You want to play to his strengths as identifying talent and drafting that, but you also want to play to his strengths of being creative with the cap, being creative in involving other teams and getting other people, like Mason Plumlee on draft night, how he packaged that. So I think it's going to be really interesting. This is a fascinating draft. I can't remember the Blazers having a more fascinating draft, maybe other than, when they got Damon Myers and then CJ, but that's when you're in the lottery. So this is probably one of the most exciting non-lottery drafts that the Blazers have had in years.
Jace, thanks for the time. Appreciate it. And things will get even more interesting as we get toward the draft on June 22nd. Some workouts to come, and I'm sure we'll see you at a few of those. And look forward to catching up with you again real soon.
Absolutely. See you guys.